All across South Africa, literally from Cape Town to Messina and from Durban to Port Nolloth, we find that farming families in the evening when they gather around the dinner table, or when one runs into your friends or neighbors at the co-op, or when you are having a braai, they talk about expropriation without compensation because it's foremost in our minds these days. It's because of the uncertainty it causes. How do you plant a tree or a new orchard if you're not certain that you'll be around to harvest from it? It is not as if the idea of losing one's property is that new to us. It's been happening for decades. But mostly when banks call up their bonds on your property, when you are indebted. We have seen a lot of that recently during the drought. And from our family farmers network, Saai, we have really started to wrestle the banks since the middle of 2019, try to convince them to give farming families another chance. We have not called the drought. It's a national disaster, and we sincerely felt that when such a disaster strikes, it is important for the whole nation to pick up the bill, and not only the few families on farms who cannot pay that year's debt. But that's not where it stops. It is curious how quiet the banks are in this debate on expropriation without compensation. And at all of these discussions with friends and with family amongst farmers, they are asking, why are the banks so silent about it? We all have a farm to lose, and some of the lucky ones might have more than one property. But the banks run the risk to lose all our properties. Very few farmers farm on a cash basis, and we offer our title deeds as collateral every year as security for our production loans. Hence, if the ball really bounces awkwardly for us in expropriation without compensation, we believe that the banks have as much to lose as we have. Or do they? We have started to push the banks on their stance on expropriation without compensation, and we are not alone in this debate. Also, the Institute for Race Relations started to push the banks to take a stance. This might be because in the previous round in 2008, when we saw a draconian concept form of an expropriation act by the same minister, Minister Toko Didiza, who at the time was the Minister of Public Works, it was the banks who really pushed the idea over the cliff, especially when APSA said, this is going to cause the kind of damage to our financial system and especially to our agricultural financing system that will be irreparable. And at the end, the idea was withdrawn. But this time, government is pushing on, and the banks are quiet. For this reason, and especially because the banks came out with a very strong position that even after expropriation without compensation, the bondholder, the farmer, will still be liable for his outstanding debt, and you still need to pay the bank. For this reason, we decided it makes no sense for every individual farmer to run to an attorney or an advocate and to get a formal opinion on this. As Saai, we identified some of the strongest legal minds in our country on this topic. And we are busy to work on a legal opinion. Should farmers still be held liable to pay back their bonds after they've been expropriated without compensation by the state? Because it will mean that they no longer have the source of their income. With what should they pay it? More important, morally, why should they pay it? There are those who say the bond is actually attached to the land. And if the land is no longer in your hands, then the bondholder should go to the one in whose hands that land is at that moment. But this might still be early days to give such an opinion as a formal one. From our side, what is important is that first and foremost, we need to fight this dragon of expropriation without compensation, and we are trying to gather as many partners and allies as possible, both in the business sector, amongst other farmers' organizations and other civil society organs, but also abroad. And we are trying to set up a very broad front against expropriation without compensation. It's a bad idea, and it's going to cause the same kind of damage as it had caused in Venezuela and next door in Zimbabwe. But we must go further than that. We need to ensure that we pool the best resources and the best minds to fight this thing in the courts, locally, nationally, and of course, internationally. And we must go even further than that. We must ensure that all the other stakeholders fight with us. For that, we need to know who's on our side and who not. And we want the banks on our side. We expect from them to be on our side. Because why should the farmer alone pick up this bill again? What sense does it make to expect from an individual in any kind of democracy to pick up the bill for a national imperative? At the end of this month, we'll see the closure of the opportunity to file public comments on the change of our constitution to allow for expropriation without compensation. And while we cannot expect from every individual or every farming family to file such an comment, we can do it from a central point, and we need your assistance. We need your voice to be added to ours. So if you support this, please add your name on the link below. There's only one way we can win this battle, and that is if we join forces. And the number of heads is going to count. Let yours be counted too.